Yeah. Welcome to Northern BC Narrative. Oh,
As I'm frozen.
welcome to Northern BC Narrative on location. Today we have with us Zandra Ross, an amazing human being with a beautiful story. Your First Nation also, right? So she's gonna talk about her life and let us know who she is. Great to have you here. Oh wow, your hands are so warm. I'm gonna not wash this hand at all. I'm not washing this hand.
Fantastic. I'll charge you. You can tip me later for that. Thank you.
Okay, so Sandra, talk about yourself and what you do.
All right. What do I do? Well, my name is Zandra Ross. My maiden name is Wycott, and I'm originally from the Williams Lake First Nation, or Sugarcane. And I have been honored to call Claytley Tene Territory my home for, geez, you know when you used to get excited saying how many years you did something and all of a sudden you hit that birthday and you go, holy smokes. So shh, don't tell anyone. I've been in this territory for 31 years.
31 years.
31 years, yes. I moved here when I was 8, if anyone's wondering. Just joking. So
I thought it was 5.
exactly. So what do? I honestly like to call myself an entertainer. And what does that mean? I love entertaining people while I'm helping them to learn and while I'm helping them to heal. So I work primarily in First Nations communities doing emotional intelligence workshops, team building, really helping people to dream again. So I'm a life and executive coach. Like everyone that, as you said, that is creative, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I have probably 5 or 6 gigs a gig at any time. I work a lot with entrepreneurs. I'm a coach as well in that with UVic. I teach at 2 Indigenous entrepreneurship programs there. Yes. And I always love it. They always call me when the students are in the valley of despair, they call me in to lift them out again and to let them know that all things are possible. And also in another life, I am a group fitness instructor, personal trainer, yoga instructor, and I used to own a studio here on top of traveling throughout Highway 16 and 97 facilitating. But that, you have to choose where you put your energy because you can't do everything at 110% all the time, and I run high most of the time. So it's really been that I kind of put that aside. And why? Because I really believe in holistic wellness. And I really believe that for my people, and not just Indigenous people, all people in this world, we need all aspects of our personal medicine wheel, the physical, emotional, spiritual, and social, all in balance as best as we can to be healthy.
Okay, let's talk about that holistic approach.
Yes.
Take it apart and talk about each aspect of it and what it is.
So really, and what I normally do with the work I do is I overlay it with emotional intelligence as well. So we've got the 4 quadrants of emotional intelligence, which is self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and social management.
Let's talk about each of them because you have to open up because it's so deep.
I know, sorry, and this is a lot of work that I do in the community, so thank you for that. So where do we start? It's really part of my healing journey because like everyone, we've all have our story. I'm the first person in my family not to go to any form of residential school or Indian day school. So we jokingly, a lot of friends are in my history, I've been called Super Indian Barbie. And why? Because of the way I look. I don't think like everyone else in my community, and I don't act like everyone else in my community a lot of times. So my journey really is what I tell people what it is all about is emotional intelligence. So at the beginning of it, self-awareness was really digging into who am I? What's important about me? What are my gifts? What are my triggers?
Let's talk about what happened you got there because you probably had some experiences for you to want to get into that. Let's talk about that a little bit.
So I am a child of custom adoption. We'll start there. My 2 moms are sisters. And they both went to residential school. And I call them my moms, my young mom and my old mom, but that's the easiest, there's 20 years difference. So my young mom, she had a very, rough growing up years. They went to residential school and she came out and was a young mom and had a lot of skills coming out of residential school. So she ended up having to go back to her residential school and worked as a dorm supervisor.
Are you serious?
Yes. So that was away from our community. She didn't have transportation and things like that, so she was going to give me up for adoption. Well, her older sister said, we don't do that in our family.
Yeah.
We're going to take her and we're going to look after her until you're ready.
Yeah.
And so what a blessing that I got to stay in my family. And years later, I realized, hey, wait a minute, that's a custom adoption. I was a custom adoption.
So what is a custom adoption?
Custom adoption in our community is where you don't go through the traditional legal methods.
Yeah.
And it's been widely contested by provincial and federal governments if it's a legal way to but in our communities are getting stronger, and we're saying no, that's our way, and that was our traditional ways.
Yeah.
And so being my color, being not totally a super traditional person, sometimes I really was conflicted about how connected am I really. I'm from my reserve, I've grown up near and on my reserve, but what does that really mean? Well, when I had this awareness that no, I am exactly what our culture is, and that was a huge part of my healing journey, was really connecting with who I am.
Yeah.
And so that was an interesting relationship, because I'd stay with one mom for the summer and I'd stay with the other mom for the school year.
What was the difference?
Well, what it is one was in the country and one was in the city.
Oh, wow.
One was in outside of Williams Lake in a small town of 150-mile house, not even outside of Williams Lake. And then I'd go between the reserve and my home, my other home. And then my biological mom, my young mom, she lived in Grand Prairie, Alberta. Yeah. So I'd never been around town or anything. So then I moved with her and then when I hit 10, I switched. So I moved and went to school in Grand Prairie, left Williams Lake, and went to spend a year full-time with my biological mom, and then I would just spend the summer with my mom who raised me. They both raised me, but that's kind of it. So I was constantly going, how do I fit in? Yeah. Where do I fit in? They don't act a lot alike. They have a lot of different beliefs. They have a lot of things that have come from going to residential school. They are amazing. They're not just survivors, they're thrivers. So I've been very blessed. Yeah. But as always, as Indigenous people that have undergone a lot of these traumas, that you're trying to figure out, how do you parent, in a lot of ways that you haven't had that. So then when I was 10, I moved with my biological mom. And you can imagine that was a complete different, because she had to ape my stepfather now, which I love dearly, but at the time it was like, who is this guy, right? Who's trying to and he had just gotten his kids back, his mom, and he's Métis. So his mom had raised his children. So all of a sudden we were this big, happy family, not, as you can imagine. That's like storming, norming, and forming. Man, we were stuck in storming a lot here. That's another one, the stages of team development, right?
Let's talk about that a little bit. What are some of the experiences?
Well, so just in terms of, you bring everybody together. You bring 2 adults and 3 children together that have never lived together before, because even his 2 children had never lived together before. They were raised, one was raised by his mother, and the other one was raised by his sister. And so we were not like the Brady Bunch moving in. And I was coming from the country. These guys had all grown up in a town city, we'll call it. So our experiences, I barely watched TV. We had very little TV exposure. We lived out in the country. These were modernized people. I was brought up where you got to share everything, but don't get too crazy with food, because there's not a lot of it. Well, then I moved into another family, and these kids would just be ravenous with food, and I would be not 10 going, stop it, why are you being so gluttonous, stop it, and I'd be using, and they'd be like, you're weird, get away from it. And so, but then I'd be with that family for a bit, and then I'd go back to the other one, and they'd go, who raised me, the most, and would go, what's wrong with you? Well, because you're changing and growing. Yeah. So I was always going, how do I fit in? How can I get everybody to just like me? So I've always been a humorous. I love humor. I love laughter. I don't like confrontation. I want everyone to feel good. Yeah. And so when you're younger, you just start not doing that necessarily in a healthy way. I always say my best friends were always my enemies. Why? Because I was like, well, I better make friends with them, because it was a protection mechanism, right? Yeah. And so so those are some of the things where you come, and so what I would even do is I would be like, I hate them, and I'd leave little mean notes when you're a little kid, right? And I'd say, I hate so-and-so, my family members, so that it would show that I'm in line with you. I don't like those other guys, and I'm with you. Yeah. So you grow up really feeling a little bit Where do I fit and who am I? And so thankfully, when I was 13 years old, our chief at the time of our reserve, my mom took me to, brought me back from Grand Prairie from a year of school, brought me home to Williams Lake to stay with my other mom, and we ended up going to the reserve. And the chief said, "Man, I want to send you to boarding school." And I went, "What?" And I was fascinated. I'd read a lot when that's how I dreamt. That's how I dealt with my situation of always being not in my home, is I pretended I was in boarding school. And that's, so all of a sudden, yes.
So you wanted to go to the boarding school. Most people, they hate it. It's crazy.
Oh my God, I dreamed about because that's how I made it tolerable. I was imagining, no, I'm just not getting switched around. This is a good thing. This is what wealthy people do with their children. They say, so I literally would even act like that when I would go to my other home. I would act really formal and because that's how I thought, that's how you act. This isn't my home. This is just a school.
So you wanted to go to boarding school?
Yes.
Because it would have given you more stability.
Freedom.
Freedom. What kind of freedom are we talking about?
Yeah, it was to be away from this feeling, this sadness all the time of moving from one home to the other and always feeling alone, right? So my chief said, "Why don't you go to this boarding school?" And I was like, and my bio mom was like, "No," because she just got me full time 3 years before. She never raised me up till I was full time. She was like, "No," and I'm like, "Yes, I'm going."
So how was the experience when you first met your mom and you had to leave
Well,
with her?
we knew each other our whole lives.
But what is different? When you move
It
in
was
with your
different.
parent, it's like...
It was terrible. It was traumatic. It was hard because I felt, as a child, you want to have these connections with both. You feel loyal. You know, when you're like a little kid, like I said, you try to be friends with your enemies. You try to, why aren't we best friends? You just want to get along with people. That's how it was with my mom's.
So she would have what would happen? Like she would be...
Well, no, they were both lovely. We would just, how do you deal with a child that's crying all the time? Because you've taken them, because I would just be sad all the time. And she'd be like, "You're here now, be happy." And I'd be like, "I'm not happy."
You liked it more with your other two moms?
Well, my old mom, that's where, so from birth to 10 years old, I lived with my auntie mom, my old mom, my bio mom's sister.
Yeah.
So full time. Then at summers and Christmas, my bio mom would come from Grand Prairie. And then I would stay with her at the res, wherever. She'd come and stay out at the ranch with us. And so then at 10, I switched. And I went full time to Grand Prairie, Alberta, to live with my biological mom. And then I was only with my parents who raised me from 1 to 10 in the summers.
Which one did you like more?
Oh, that's so hard to say. When you're a little kid, of course, it's who you were born with. It was my other mom. And that was part of the thing, too, about the healing process, is I romanticized it, that it was perfect when I was little, right? Like we do. It's perfect. And so then the second part of my life, I call it, or my teen years, I spent my years almost making myself a victim, going, yes, it's so terrible here, and they're so bad to me. But also partially because I felt I had to be loyal.
Yeah.
How does a kid know that they have enough love for both?
Yeah.
And especially when you have people that, they try to let you love both of them, but they both got their own issues. They both never grew up with parents, barely. You know what I mean? So they've got their own abandonment issues, their own connection issues. So in terms of relationship and where we could be, like, I am so blessed that I am a communicator. I was a born communicator. Yep. So I was able to say when I wasn't happy, I was able to say how I was feeling. I was able to, advocate for myself. Like I said, my mom in Grand Prairie, and that's, sorry to confuse everyone, but it is. So, and that's why I call it my old mom and my young mom. Yeah. So my young mom was like, "You're not going there. You live with me." And my old mom was like, "Do you really want to do that?" Because she was all about experiences. She's 92 now. She didn't have a lot of opportunities or experiences. Yeah. And so she's like, "Well, do you want to do that? Okay, let's do that. How do we do it?" We didn't even have a phone. They lived out in the country. We didn't have a phone. We didn't have TV out there. And I'm 13, and I'm like, I don't know what to do. And you talk about fate and things happening for a reason. Yeah. And that's, I think, what we're here to talk about, is a journey, right? Yeah. And what I tell people is always say yes to the good things, to the scary things. Not the things that you know aren't so good, but, right? But the things that you think there might be an opportunity. So we're sitting there, and my parents are paranoid. They live at the end of this country road, no TV, no phone. And all of a sudden, my mom's like, who's coming up the road? And I'm like, I don't know. And we'd get scared because my dad was out in the fields working somewhere. Because they're, you know, by this time, they're in their, they would have been in their, getting into their later 50s, because they were in their early 40s when I was born. And all of a sudden, so I haven't seen this person. I had a best friend from grade 1 to grade 3 when I lived in Williams Lake. And all of a sudden, this woman shows up. It's her mom. And I've been moved to Grand Prairie for 3 years. I haven't seen her, talked to them. My old mom hasn't, because we used to live on the same near them, but my parents moved, bought a new, they didn't live there anymore. And I was like, we were like, what are you doing here? And she goes, I had a dream about you. And I was like, what? She goes, and I had to come and find you, or at least find your mom where she lived. So she went around town asking people, do you know where Jim and Kathy McKenzie live now? Small town. Until they said, yeah. She literally asked for days and then drove up this road and found me.
Oh, wow.
And then she said to my mom, can I take Zan out for the day? And my mom was like, yeah. And it was weird because it was just, nobody came. Nobody knew where they were. So we went on this drive, and I told her about my life, kind of like what I'm doing now. And at the time, I was really unhappy. I said, I don't want to be in Grand Prairie. I don't like it there. I don't, because I'd had this loyalty issue, right? So I felt like I could only love one family. And so she said, you want to go to boarding school? And I said, yes. She goes, give me a couple days. And this is a woman that doesn't have a grade 12 education. She is one of the 60s scoop ladies. So she never knew she was even Native.
What is that talking about?
Yeah, so the 60s scoop is back in the 60s when it was government policy. So you've got residential school, which was a policy back from the 1800s where we're going to, you know, bring children, make them part of society. The 60s scoop was when, after residential school, like started, they weren't, because residential schools went right into the 90s.
Yeah, it's terrible, eh?
It is.
You know, they really tried to destroy the advanced culture, but it backfired, right?
Totally, right? So in the 60s, the government policy said, uh-oh, what do we do? We're you know, what we can't. And because of all the damage that had been done, our families were in trouble. A lot of them were struggling. And because of the government policies of, you know, Indian agents, my family will talk about them, instead of bringing food, they would bring alcohol, because Native people couldn't leave the reserve to even go shopping. So a truck would come and bring food to the reserve to feed them. But sometimes they'd make them a deal and go, do you want food or you want booze? Because booze was cheaper. So then they started proliferating. I don't want to get off into that because I'm not here to make, but I think that's part of the truth, right?
Yeah,
and it isn't to beat up on anybody.
Yeah,
and that's what I say too, because
right?
growing up as a kid, what I would hear so much from my white friends was, that's not my fault, I didn't do it. And so a lot of the work I do, government will say, you're so collegial. And what they mean by it is, I'm not here to beat anybody up because it doesn't do any good. You know, when you beat racists up, it doesn't make them become less racist. They become more freaking racist, right? It's a fight, right? And so for me, a lot of it is, no, it isn't, because it happened. You're right. You didn't do it. So why? And then people go, okay. And then we can start to have a conversation about race and about issues when people don't have to feel attacked. And yes, you do have to have the truth, but that's the power of the truth, is you don't have to blame anybody. You don't have to, we can just talk about it. It's our history. It's our shared history in this country, right? So the 60s scoop was, okay, what do we do now? We need to get control of these people again. And look at them. They're messing up their kids. They're all drunks. Well, because of the policies of the day, it made us that way. So then what happened is, we need to start taking these children, because residential schools aren't doing enough, because they, you know, our people were starting to take their kids back. So then there was this policy that if we don't believe that you can look after your kids, we are going to do. And so they started bringing school buses en route to reserves, and they would go house to house. And it became a government policy that children, they need an education in British Columbia, in Canada. So you have to. It's a government policy that your child has to come with us. And if you fight us, we can arrest you.
Oh, wow.
So the horror, I won't even let you, you can only imagine the horror.
I know a lot about it, but I'd
right?
rather have it from your mouth.
You do, yeah. And I know that's such a blessing to have you sharing, right, these stories. But it was, you can imagine if some stranger came to your house one day, for all my parents or even my pet owners, Could you imagine if somebody came and said, I'm taking your dog away that you love, that you raised from, right? Just because some people, I want to make sure everybody, your heart is broken.
Yeah.
And what happens is you become even sicker.
Yeah.
So you might have been poor, you might have been hungry, you might have been downtrodden. Now your reason for living is gone.
It's systematic, right? So
It's systematic.
they always suppress those strongest people.
Well, and that's what my husband even loves too. He's learned so much, and because he's non-Indigenous, and he even loves to say, he goes, "I wish that your people wouldn't." He says, "You know that colonization isn't the right word." He's like, "That's not the right meaning what you guys use." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "The true meaning of colonization has to do with food production. Where are you able to colonize?" He said, when we talk about colonizing the moon, people think it's putting people up there. No, it's the ability to be able to grow food up there. And I went, huh. And he goes, your people were conquered. And I said, and I didn't know what to think. And he goes, colonize sounds so much less bad to me, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I went, and here's this non-Aboriginal person holding, and I went, you're right. So even there, using this word of colonization, we think that it's such an evil word. It's not. It's kind of a nice soft word compared to conquered, which means you took us over. You ripped away our lands. Colonization is we planted gardens for you. We built schools, right? When you think about it, and that really empowered me to go, okay, so this isn't totally right. Because right now with the government, we're in this reconciliation, and it's very soft, you know what I mean? Because nothing is changing. There's no treatment centers, there's no healing centers. Like, oh no, we're gonna go do some nice things, and we're gonna have the Prime Minister go to your reserve and shake hands with people. And sorry, I don't wanna be, because our elders were so thrilled. But that is nothing.
Yeah.
That is nothing. Our people are sick and in the streets right now. They need healing centers. They need treatment centers. They need, we're really working and sorry, I'm going on a this is my passion, right? You can build homes for people, but if there isn't that support, if there isn't that helping them grow their emotional intelligence, grow their health, make sure they're eating the right food, that's what our brains, it's all brain science. If you don't feed it the right way, give it enough water, give it enough love, you hit it too much, you give it too much drugs, you get brain damage. Yeah. And yet we just think, oh no, build more homes. That's what's going to solve all your, and how dare you be so ungrateful. We built you 3 homes and now you guys are still on the street.
It has to be, the indigenous cultures around the world, they always have a holistic kind of approach to everything. Everything is like a circle, right? So that's what's missing, right? So you need to have all of it, right? So you cannot just have one, it won't work, right? So that's what you're talking about here, right?
Completely. And that's where I come back to these circles, always back to the circles, right? Whether it's the medicine, it's the medicine wheel, the true medicine wheel, it's the emotional intelligence medicine wheel. There's this circle, like you said, always. And I think of it as light. Because you think about that's kind of what we see when we see a light, whether it's your spotlights in the audience, whether it's the sun, whether it's a star. We don't see all those pokey things. We see
the circle.
A circle.
Yeah, you're right. Wow, that's amazing. That's crazy, eh? We can go so deep into it, but I don't think we want to.
No, please, sorry, I didn't mean to digress.
We both are going to be sad.
That's where my work...
But it's the truth, right? So what can you do about it?
But you know what? It lifts me up. So that's the work that I do now. Because it gets sad.
Yeah.
And that's why I love to say I'm an entertainer, because I believe that we can heal with humor and laughter.
Yeah, I think it's one of the best things you can do.
Yes.
The things you can do with humor or laughter, because it kind of lets your guard down and then opens you up without being too vulnerable, right?
Completely.
Right? So that's one of the best ways, right? Yeah.
Well, in our communities and for our people, there's so much shame and blame because that's how they were dealt with in residential
Again, that's
school.
systematic again, right? Because if they put you in that energy vibration, right?
Yes.
They could always put more stuff on you. We can't do it.
Well, no, exactly. Well, and it's really about managing people. And if we come back to social management, I'll bring it back to the medicine wheel in residential school. Because it's even funny, people go, I'm a thinker, I go deeper. And I say, even residential school, I asked my mom, I said, why were they so angry? Why were, the priests and nuns weren't there. It was the government's doing it. And they go, well, for a lot of them, she said, because she befriended some of the nuns. And they said, just like everyone, they were told a story. they would come from England and Ireland.
Yeah.
These poor children need you. These people, these savages are out in Canada and they are just beasts. They're attacking, like the true, vision of the native, Indian out in the plain.
Yeah.
So then they came and all of a sudden they were glorified babysitters.
Oh.
And that's what my mom, because she was older, because she stayed there till she was quite old. She became like kind of a confidant to some of the, and she said they were bitter. They were sold, and she goes, who wants to be a babysitter? You think you're here to do this glorious job of God, which is whatever they thought, beautiful and clean. And here they were with these crying kids who didn't want to be there, who couldn't speak English, who had completely different ways of growing up than them. And they were upset, they were mad. So do I totally, because we can say they should have been nicer, they couldn't have, well, everybody should be, but they were in their own. Everybody's got a story.
You're right. Well, I mean, if you are, if you're, I guess,
you should be.
You
You
are
should be.
part of a religion or spiritual modality, then you should preach what you practice. I mean, right? You should be nice and all that stuff, right?
Everybody
Isn't that
should.
makes you more humble if you put up with those stuff, right? I mean,
Totally.
So,
But it's just an interesting, oh my goodness. It's just a totally, it's just a totally interesting, and that's why I say, I used to spend my time, that's how I grew up, people going, that's not my fault, and being very confrontational about it. And now, my favorite thing is to go, how can we learn from each other?
Yeah.
How can we, because it doesn't
so
matter.
it doesn't repeat. Well, it's repeating all over the world all
It
the time.
is.
Still repeating the same stuff everywhere. It's the system, right? It's just like everywhere you go, you see it, right? So, how can we learn from it so we don't get tricked anymore? Right?
And that's where we have to share our stories in a non-confrontational, non-attacking way. Well, that's it. Where I can talk to even a racist person, we'll say, because I grew up with a lot of them. I have a friend that wouldn't allow me to tell her dad that I was Native when I was a teenager because he was that racist. And he would say, and I would just sit there because you're a kid and you don't know. Well, the day I graduated from high school, I was like, I have something to tell you, Dawn. And my friend is like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I don't care. I'm a grown-up now, and I'm moving to Prince George because I was just getting ready to come here to go to CNC. And I said, I get to say whatever I want now. And I said, guess what? You can't say that all Native people are bad. And he goes, what? And I go, because you know one good one. And it reminded me of the Terminator, like the second where the face is all doing all the weird things. You could see like this, and he goes, okay, I guess I can say I know one good one. And we laughed. And I mean, this was in the this was in the early 90s. And I mean, still then. But you know what? That's all I can do. And that's all any one of us can do is change one person at a time. And I think that's a lot of it. And I joke about it, but it's true. The more you try to enforce non-racism with racism, it backs them more into their... Look at American politics right now. That's what's happening is it just pushes everybody even further into their corner. So that's the work that I love to do. And I love to infect our communities with dreams, with goals.
You know something? Somehow they manage to convince us that we are not one race. Somehow they did that. It's because there's only one race, it's human race. There's no colors, there's nothing. But somehow they trick every one of us, right? To think that, we're all different and things like that. But we all want the same things. We all want to have a good planet. We want to have a peaceful world. And we want the humanity to go up, right? So, I mean, because when you have diversity, this is what happens, right? When you keep separating people and then, you label everybody that is different, right? Then what happens? Then you start really thinking, hey, maybe, well, there's different colors, there's different cultures, which is beautiful. Is when it comes together, all those cultures together, they just, you learn so much and it becomes more beautiful and more beautiful. But we're all the same race. There's only one race, human race, right?
And that's where we get back to emotional intelligence.
Yeah,
that's what
that's the
social,
circle again,
that's
right?
what social management is. Like social management, emotional intelligence can be used for good or evil. And what happens with all this division, this is social management at its worst, because what we're doing is, no, we're going to manage people by dividing them. We need to, and it's this idea of having more and collecting. And that's why, that's the ideology difference, right? Of Western and any traditional is, and people will even say about Indigenous people, well, you conquered as well. And we went, and we did. It's human nature
Yeah.
to want more, right? So even when we talk about our own, that there's this big divide between the West and traditional values, I don't think so. If we look at every traditional community in the world, unless you're in the, well, even those Amazon guys now, they're still warning their neighbors, right? And trying to make sure that their land is protected.
Yeah.
So like you said, we are all the same at the core, right? We're all like M&Ms. We might be different on the outside, but we're all the same color on the inside.
Well, it's crazy. I mean, the indigenous culture has a lot of similarities to a lot of cultures around the world, right? And it's insane, like when you compare them to some other cultures, like, like my culture, for example, we do a lot of similarities, right? We use a drum. It's a heartbeat. That's what we use it, right? So in your culture, you guys, is it considered a heartbeat?
Yeah. Oh, yes,
That's
definitely.
why you use it, right?
Yes, yes.
So that there's a lot of similarity between these cultures. So there shouldn't be any kind of, like, you're the same basically, right? Because there's a lot of things that the indigenous culture practices that a lot of cultures where I'm from and many others is exactly almost the same, but a little bit different, a little bit with a twist, right? So
yes.
And yeah, I know the drum is a big one everywhere.
Well, if you ever watch, one of my favorite documentaries is called Indians Who Rock the World.
Yeah.
And it is all about how indigenous music is influenced everything that we see now. And not just indigenous as we think, all of us, right? Like you said, the drum, the rattle, those are all traditional instruments. And what does that mean? Those came from cavemen. That's where we learned to first start our ceremonies and traditions. So like you said, it's land that separated us.
Yeah.
And even the color of our skin, it's not because of it's something inherently different. It's just because of where we lived. And our skin had to adapt
The
to
melatonin,
protect ourselves,
right?
right? Exactly. Right? Like, isn't that ironic when you think about it? It was only a physiological adaptation, really, to protect us from burning up in hot areas. And you're white here because there is no sun where you live, so you will stay white. Like, so anyway, it's just an interesting thing, right? That we have made these physical connections to not real things. They are, but they're not. They have nothing to do with the inner core of who we are.
Exactly. The blood is the same color, right? The bones are the same. It's just like, again, I think it's just all this separation, right? Because if you find a common ground between each other, because most cultures, they have a common ground, right? Then there's no fighting, there's no differentiation.
You don't need government then. You don't need all of these programs and services. Really, if we lived a truly traditional clan life, we would all have a job. That's kind of what's missing now. Our young people don't, what's my role? What's my job? When you look at traditionally, like every kid knew when they were born, they had a role in life and they were raised to do that in every culture. Now, there's almost too many choices. And so we get into this cognitive dissonance or this who am I? What should I do? Like, should I be this or that? Because there's too many choices almost for
There's
people.
way too many choices. And then some of the choices are, I guess, is a waste of time, right? Because sometimes, we came to this planet, right, to do something. Right?
Yes.
I like to think that we came to this world to live it much better than what we had before, right? Not to be fooled, not to be tricked, but to make it better than what we have right now.
Completely.
And I think a lot of people, they miss that point, and then they don't do anything. They do some stuff, but it's not really giving value to changing everything, right? So.
And that's really at the heart of my work.
Good.
Is when we get back to it, is I want to help people dream again.
Yeah.
And I think that's missing. It's just, we've got to do different things. We have to do things like this. We have to share stories. We have to, but also we have to be able to have hard conversations without being hard on each other.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of the work that I do in our communities right now is, because there's a lot of this, and backbiting and because we weren't allowed to say what we wanted to. We didn't have emotional intelligence. Why? Because it was beat out of you. It was starved out of you. It wasn't valued, because if you're weak, the weak don't survive, right? When you're when you're trying to survive. So all of those things, emotional intelligence wasn't valued. Strength, when you think about violence, intimidation, fear, that's how that part of social management grows. That's how we keep people in line, right? So that's a lot of what the work that I do is emotional intelligence in our communities. I just got to play games. That's the other thing too. I do a lot of team building, and people go, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe we did this together." And I'm like, well, how can we even start to talk about solving problems until we can laugh together? And there's so much shame and blame because that's how we were controlled. Let's shame and blame each other.
Yeah. Talk about that a little bit.
In terms of shame and blame? Okay, so again, that's how you think about it when you're not healthy, and that's where it started in residential school, is these people weren't these kids' parents. So they're not gonna raise them with love and proper communication. You're gonna, and that's where we get this term crabs in the bucket, right? Where we talk about people, you heard that a lot, right? Well, because it's safer that way. Somebody's out there on their own. Well, that means I'm going to get in trouble if I'm not like them. So let's all just keep us here because they get special attention. They get they're nice to them. We're just going to keep you here with us because it's scary to go out there. So we'd hold on to it. So what happens is, and how do you keep people in line? By jokingly call them Super Indian Barbie. We do a lot of teasing in our culture. And I'm starting to realize it's the worst thing that it is. Our people make it sound like it's just part of, no, it's not. It makes people feel small, right? When you get teased, very rarely do you go, man, I feel great after I got teased, right? Never. The people that think it's funny, oh, that's your elders. That's how the person never feels that way. And so we've developed this way in our community of teasing. But really it's about shame and blame. That's how the person feels. Right? And so, but then your leaders, your social management, and that's when you don't have any healthy influence, right? When you've got all this negativity coming from all these sources, that's what happens, is you start turning that anger, that negativity from out there, you start turning that inward, right? And so you start shaming and blaming yourself.
You start self-destructing, basically, right? That's what happens.
Everything
falls apart.
Yes, well, and I grew up hearing from friends, from other, don't wish for too much, because the opposite might happen. Because that's what our people believe. They never knew if they were going to be taken away one day, if they were going to have their parents there, if they were will there be food? Well, so many of our people live right now in the moment. And that's what people say, oh, Native people, they can't plan for the future. Well, no, how can you? And people go, well, that was 20, 30 years ago. Well, no, I'm the first person in my family not to go to residential school. I'm the first generation that's being able to learn and have options and choices and freedom. When you said, why did I want to go? Because I wanted freedom, even at 13.
So we should go back to the,
yes.
We continue.
Yes.
Because you brought it up. So, so you were excited to go to boarding school. I went to boarding school. It's not very fun.
Oh God, mine was the best thing that ever happened in my life.
Talk about it.
Okay.
So talk about, so what happened? So you were in the car, you made a decision. Yeah, I guess you had to pack and stuff like that. What were some of the resistance?
Well, so the funniest thing was, okay, so my mom, and I'm just going to call them by their names because they'll probably watch us. Loretta is my young mom, who is one of my best people in my life.
Loretta.
Kathy, right? Catherine is her beautiful sister, my other mom. And it's so cool because we have such a tight bond, the three of us, because my Catherine is old enough to be Loretta's mom. So we are almost like mother, daughter, granddaughter. Like we have a really tight circle, right?
That's amazing.
So Loretta dropped me off in Williams Lake for the summer. Chief said, you should go to boarding school.
Was she excited about dropping you off, or was she like, she was?
Well, it was every summer, that's what we would do. Okay. So she was used to that because she only used to get me for the summer, for the first 10 years of my life. So to her, it was like, okay, that's what our whole lives were. Because then from say like 6 to 10, when I was old enough, I would go to Grand Prairie, and then she would work all day and I'd be with the babysitter. And then finally I said, I was a very mature child, I hate those babysitters. I can stay by myself. And my mom was a single working woman, okay. So at 7 years old, I babysat myself. I'd never had a babysitter. And she'd go to work, I'd go grocery shopping, so a lot of, as much as these things are tribulations, I'm so blessed by them because they made me this self-directed, focused person that I pretty much can survive anywhere. I am a cactus, my friend. So she was, okay, you're going there. She was not happy when I said, I want to go to boarding school. She's like, you're not going to boarding school. You're coming back home with me.
That's Loretta.
Loretta, sorry, yes. And I went, well, whatever. So they went away. That was fine. She went back home. Well, then literally 2 days later, Elsie shows up, my friend's mom, that came and said, I dreamt about you. Elsie shows up and says, let's go for a drive. You want to go to boarding school? Give me a couple of days. And I'm like, oh, whatever. Oh, well, that was fun. I had a little bit of a break from, because I got no phone and no TV. And I've come from phone and TV in Grand Prairie to now back to my mom's dad's ranch where there's no running water, no TV, no phone, no power.
No running water.
No. My dad brings in water. We boil it for showers. We've got like a little camp shower that puts boiling water and we shower. It's just the way my dad loved ranching, and it was the ranch that they chose. Yes. So a couple of days later, all of a sudden, Elsie shows up again, and she was like, and mind you, this is July. So anybody who knows anything, boarding schools are harder to get into than university, okay?
Why?
Oh, in BC, because they are only for the very richest. They are super oversubscribed. The wait list is on crazy. Well, they have like alumnus ones where the kids are on the wait list when they're born, right? So all of a sudden she goes, okay, I found 2 schools that would be willing to even look at you right now. And I was like, what? She was like, so Queen Margaret's on the island or St. Margaret's School for girls. These are the 2 schools. And even then, they're like, the only reason they want to talk to you is because you're Native. We didn't even have the first word of First Nations or Indigenous back then. It was because this was 87. And I was like, okay, let's go. She was like, well, and then she showed up. So then I imagined ivy walls and all these things that you think of in a really fancy boarding school. This school wasn't it. This school was and I joke on it now because if anybody...
Dungeon, did it look...
Oh my God, it was like a dungeon compared to every other boarding school. Like it was just perfect. It was like a comedy show that this is the one that would want me. And God love them now. It is one of the highest end beautiful school. But at the time, it was a dingy little old boarding school. I think that's why. And the headmistress was like, she's Native? That's pretty cool. Let's get her in here.
Why did you want a Native so bad?
Because they were just starting. It was something different and new, and it was a diversity. Even back then, boarding schools were like, because they had Chinese students, they had students from Mexico, and we had another girl from Brazil, because that's what they loved, having these foreign exchange students. Why? Because they paid more. They would even have more for foreign exchange students. Well, for me, I was just, because there wasn't anybody, so, okay, how do I say, there was nobody at that time that identified as Native at their school. So they were like, hey, you got a smart Native person? Because it was still that belief that Native people were dumb and we weren't any good. So I went there. My parents were like, what do we do? And my parents aren't, at the time, Catherine had a grade 4 education. She got out of there. She barely had, like, when she tested out, she was at residential school for years, but had no education. So they were like, okay, what do we do? They had no money. We lived in a place with nothing. And yet they found enough money days later, got some gas money, got enough, went and bought me one nice outfit because I had nothing there. We were living, I didn't eat anything. One nice outfit, and I went to the school, and we went and we drove all night to Victoria, stayed in this hotel that we could barely afford in Hope because it was too expensive to stay in Victoria. So we stayed in Hope and then drove early in the morning, took the ferry. And we got there, and I was like, what the heck am I doing here? And the headmistress was like, hello, just like what you would think. I had to write 2 placement tests. She interviewed me, and I was like, oh man, I ain't getting in here. Before we left, because we were there for, she toured us around the States, and I think she did that, took us on a tour around the grounds, was because she was getting somebody to mark my exams. It was English and math. And this is the funny thing, it's all meant for a reason. So anybody who's wondering out there, everything that happens is meant for a reason. So we literally get back to the grounds, somebody comes and gives her a note, and she goes, you've been accepted within 2 hours. And I'm like, what? She goes, you have one of the highest English marks we've ever seen, one of the highest English entrance marks we've ever seen. We haven't had time to get your math done, but that's okay. Your English is good. The most ironic thing is, I almost have a bit of, we'll put it this way, I failed the math test miserably. I almost have a little bit of dyslexia with numbers, undiagnosed. It was a mess. And so I thank God, like I said, it was meant for a reason. If she would have saw my math, I don't think they would have took me. And then in the meantime, so we went racing back. My band said, yep, we're paying for you to go. And literally this all happened in about like a month. And then within the mid-August, I was driving there and I was in boarding school getting dropped off. And it was the worst freaking thing you could ever imagine to start with.
Let's talk about it.
Okay? Okay, so I get there and I'm like, what is this place? Like, it seemed kind of cool at first. Then I got there. Well, I'm a child with already abandonment issues.
Yeah.
Right? Severely. I didn't realize. I thought, I got 2 sets of parents. How lucky am I? Like, I am really a positive thinker. I am a total glass half full person. Yeah. I like everything. I'm like, look at me. I didn't see anything that I underwent as any trauma or any difficulty. Until you go, I have no family at all here. I know nobody. And these kids, we'll put it this way. The one girl is 14 years old and her parents are giving her $5,000 a month for allowance.
That time.
Yes. This is in 1987 because she's from, they were from, where was her family from? Well, no, her parents were living in Europe, but they were American.
Yeah.
So to them, that was just normal. She had a terrible cocaine problem because you can imagine what a 14-year-old in the 80s was like.
In the boarding school.
Yes. Oh my God, my boarding school. So at first, and we'll get down that story. So at first I'm like, holy crap, these people are really wealthy beyond anything that I know, but still not as wealthy as I would learn. Because again, I'm at the cheapest boarding school that you could possibly imagine. But these people are wealthy beyond my belief. All of my stuff, because my parents, they could afford to get me a couple of dress shirts, yeah, and that's about it. I didn't have anything. Everything I owned came out of the lost and found from this boarding school. Everything.
Did you feel bad that because of that a little bit?
No, that was the weird thing because I didn't have a lot before then, yeah, and now I had rich chicks leftover stuff. But even that wasn't very good. It was funny. Everyone laughs to this day. I had a Holly Hobbit, or no, Raggedy Ann and Andy quilt was somebody else's name sewn onto it. But I was like, look at me. This is cool. Because again, too, you're like, I am different. And that kind of made me unique there. Because I was completely different there. To the teachers, to the house mothers, nobody knew what to do with me. But the first 2 months, I was plunged into the deepest despair. I cried every day. Because I have nobody here. I'm like, what am I doing here? I'm sleeping in a room with 4 strangers. I'm like, and 3 of them couldn't speak English at all. So we would all fight, and they'd be speaking Chinese and Spanish, and we'd be yelling, and we'd all be yelling, you anorexic chicken, Pinocchio, and stuff, because they wouldn't know what we were saying. We'd all laugh, and then they'd be saying swear words. Like, it was chaos. And you've literally got 4 people looking after 60 kids, right? So I liken that back to residential school. When we look at how do you manage people, you have to manage when how do you manage when you're outnumbered, yeah, by kids that have more money than you. These kids had more money than anybody that worked at that school. Do you know what I mean? How, yeah, how do you get a kid to listen to you that, yeah, goes, whatever, servant, you work for me. Yeah. And that's how some of them acted. And so I went in there, and the first 2 months were horrible. One of my funniest stories is, and also nobody identified as Indigenous there. I literally was like, oh, there's the Indian girl. There's the Native girl. And so it was like everyone kind of just walked around, and I cried all the time, so everyone was kind of nervous of me.
Well, why did you cry? Why?
Because I was homesick. I was by myself. I was alone. I was just, what am I doing here? I thought it was, I was abandoned. You know, I'm a kid that's had connection issues already, yeah, never growing up in the same place. And now I'm in a totally with nobody. So I was so homesick for home. I don't know where. Because I didn't really have a home I connected totally with. So all of a sudden, one of these older girls, one of the head girls, we call them, right? You know, one of the student council people, yeah, all of a sudden I could see this group of older girls, and they were in grade 11, and I'm in grade 9. And I could see them talking to me, pointing at me and stuff. Well, where I grew up, you're going to fight when people are doing that, right? Like, I grew up in a really rough town of, yeah, Grand Prairie, and we're going to fight. So I'm like, oh my gosh, are those chicks? So then I started getting really aggressive looking at, because I had no idea that's how out of my element I was. And I am not a violent person. I am not a fighter, but I'm like.
You have to for survival, right?
Right?
What do you do, right?
I don't know what's going to happen. And I'm used to being, you're weak, you get victimized. Not necessarily by my family, no, just the way the world works. So all of a sudden, one of the girls walks up and she goes, Zan, right? Zandra? And I'm like, yes. She was like, she looks at there, and she's nervous, I can tell. And I'm like, what is she nervous about? She goes, so your band sent you here, right? And I looked at her, and for the first second, it was like, you know what bands are? You know what? Yeah, they did. And I thought, maybe she knows. Like, oh my God, somebody I can talk to.
Yeah.
And she goes, awesome. And she looks around, she gives a thumbs up to the other girls, and they're like, Wicked. She goes, what instrument do you play? And I stopped and I looked at her and I thought she was making fun of me for a second. And I go, and I thought, and I go, the clarinet. And she goes, oh my God, that's even better. She goes, we've got a little jazz ensemble and we would love for you to come and jam with us if you want.
Yeah.
And she was dead serious. She thought my music band sent me to, she had no idea, to boarding school. She had no idea what, yeah. And that's a lot of the problem, is because people in every generation, we forget about stuff, right? There's people now that don't even know what, they hear about residential. My husband said, I never ever heard of residential school. And he went to university in New Brunswick. Like, there's a lot of Native and white issues there. But anyway.
Well, did you know how to play that instrument or no?
No, it was just a joke. I thought I was being a smarty butt back to her because I thought she was being a jerk to me. And I looked at her and I went, oh my God. And I just shook my head and I said, no, I don't play in a band. And she went, what? And then she was totally confused. So that was one of my first where I went, okay, this is what a band is. And then I educated, and they were like, oh, you're Native? And that was even better to them because, so nobody self-identified there.
Yeah.
So then I decided, so then all of a sudden, my old self started coming back and I really started having fun. This place, because I was always very independent because of the way I grew up, right?
Yeah.
I always acted like I was an adult from childhood to protect myself. Well, then that works really well in school because nobody else knew anything bad. So I got to I'll help them roll their joints and help them go score alcohol and things that I learned younger and they were all new. Well, the fact that I was so self-confident, the fact that I had no parents, that really, well, because my one set of parents didn't have a phone. My mom, Loretta, was pretty angry with me when I first went. So we didn't talk for like probably 2 months. That's why I was so homesick, because I had nobody to call me. I didn't talk to any of my family for a couple of months. It got so homesick where I said, I want to come home, where my chief and two of our education counselor and one of our counselors came from the reserve, came all the way from Sugarcane, took me in a hotel and stayed and said, you're staying.
Oh, wow.
You're not leaving. You're staying there.
Tough love.
Totally. And I'm like, I don't want to. And they said, you're staying. You're going to regret it if you don't. Man, were they right. If I would have left. So that's where everything that I am now, I say, as much as my family, it was boarding school. It was me going, girl, you got to shine. You are like, I had nothing. I built myself up. And to where I won everything. I won every award that you could imagine. And yes.
Talk about that.
Not necessarily all the academic awards. Mine were we had this big acting. This is where my acting passion, because I am an unfulfilled actor. When people, that's what I say, my job is entertainer. So we had a little acting program, and we had the craziest acting teacher, Miss McMillan. She was amazing. And so she was always, because everyone was bitter, I felt, at our school, because they wanted to be at St. George's or St. Michael's or one of these big fancy schools where really, that are good. So she was always that kind of, oh God, we're going to another festival. Let's go do something. Well, then I came and I was like, I love acting. Oh my God, acting is so much fun. And I get to be my crazy self. Nobody tells me to be quiet. You're talking too much. You're too hyper. They want me to be more hyper there. Because I do have, I think, a little bit of undiagnosed ADHD. We're not sure, but hey, who wants to? That's the secret sauce, people. And so I started doing everything. And she goes, I want you to go into the Victoria Music Festival, which is all of Vancouver Island, Greater Victoria Music Festival. And it's not your regular, this isn't just a high school music festival. These are like, the best of the best are coming to this because it's all these boarding schools and blah, blah. I'm like, whatever, I still don't know anything because I really don't know anything about these better boarding schools at the time. I learned about it afterwards. And so I never liked doing anything small. So I signed up for 6 things. 6 different categories. Yeah. So, the duologue, the monologue, the spoken word, everything that you could imagine. And I also had a full course load at school, and I was, and I wasn't the best student. Yeah. I was the one, literally. My classmates really struggled with me, especially the ones who struggled in school, because they'd get mad because they'd go, how can you sit out and smoke pot and drink while we're studying our brains out and you still beat the pants off of all of us? So I was very blessed. I got a mind that just works that way, right? And so I'm doing a full course load plus audition, like practicing every day, because it's a big thing. And my drama teacher's like, you're my star. Like, this is my way to get to the big time, right? And she is like, oh, girl, we're going all the way. And I'm like, okay, well, then we get to this music festival, and it's just, again, another awfully where you can either be small, because they're not like ours, where she brought like 6 of us. We're like a ragtag bunch. No, these schools sent one person. That was their star. So a school with, 500 people, one person they picked to go and compete in this thing. And they would have a music coach, a singing coach, an acting coach. Like, this wasn't just the drama teacher like ours. They had paid professionals that were actually working with them. And I'm like, oh my God. And it was hilarious because they're literally like this, looking at us, giving us dirty looks, right? Like, these people are in it to win it. And there was 2 of them. God love you, Julie McCracken. I wonder what happened. There was a boy and a girl. Julie McCracken, and she was just this blonde, mean girl. You could just see, I don't even know, she probably was really nice, but that's the ice queen, right? And then there was a boy, and I can't remember his name. Why? Because I beat him so bad, I can't even remember. Julie McCracken was my real competition. Yeah. I didn't know it at the time. So I went up, and
Are you guys friends now?
No, I don't know her. Couldn't even remember where she is. I don't know what happened to Julie McCracken. So if anybody hears of her out there, tell her to look me up. I'd love to see what happened to her. And so we went through, and it was 3 days of intensive competition. Like, it was just 3 days. We didn't go to school. We just sat in this auditorium and competed. And
what was the competition?
it was the Greater Victoria Music Festival, as music and theater festival. And it was acting, singing. It was basically performing arts. Okay. And I think there was dancing and stuff, but that wasn't on my day.
Were you doing all of it at the same time?
No, so what I was doing I did a monologue, a duologue, I did a public speaking one, I did a poem, I did I can't even remember, they were all spoken like acting performances or spoken word. So at the end of it, we'd come back every day, and man, I was winning pretty good. And even when I wasn't winning, even like when I totally didn't even have time to write my speech, we ran out of time. I had no speech for the speech competition. My speech teachers, Miss McMillan, said, Zan, what do you know a lot about? Because that's what you're going to have to run in there with. And I'm like, And at the time, I was kind of in between struggling with an eating disorder. And I said, I know a lot about anorexia and bulimia. And she was like, oh. And you can see, she got a concerned look. And I said, I know a lot about it. She goes, you need to go talk about that for 3 minutes, because you got 3 minutes. And I stumbled over my words. I didn't know what. And I still came in second to Julie McCracken. Beat that other kid who had this perfect speech, but he froze. Remember how we were talking when you prepare too much? He forgot. And he was like, where I just kept stumbling over my words. Julie was perfect. And I came second. I was like, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. So I had a collection of firsts to thirds in this. So I was in the top 3 of every single thing that I did. So we come to the final day, and they're, doing all the special awards, which are the extra award, like not just winning. There was best overall theater performance, like where they would get that one person who kind of did the best. Then there was a dance performance, blah, 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 right? Well, all of a sudden, the biggest award is coming, which is, and I can't even remember the name. I actually still have the award. But long story short, no, I do know. It was the most potential award.
Okay. This all happening at the same time?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
So I'm sitting there, and we're all laughing, and we're all shooting death glares over to Julie McCracken, because we're all like, it's her, man.
You can't say her name anymore.
I know, right? Sorry, Julie. But it's that person, right? So we all knew it was good, because she was amazing. She was amazing. Like this, that's why I said I would love to know what happened to her, because if she's not a professional performer right now, I don't know why, because she sang, she did it all. And all of a sudden they came, and the other thing was, the judges were not kind to us.
Let's talk about that.
The judges were not. You could tell these judges were from boarding schools or higher end people. They would smile at these other boarding school people or other schools that were, and they would smile. We'd get up there and they'd be like this.
Holy.
And and I do my thing. So we're all laughing. We never expected any special awards because even our teacher was like, you guys were just here. Is the bus here yet? Like even she was annoyed, right? She's like, are we leaving yet? And all of a sudden the head adjudicator got up and started saying, you know, this person, blah, 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 and started saying these just amazing things about if this person doesn't have a career in entertainment at some point, we haven't done our job right and we haven't developed and blah, blah, blah. And we're all like, blah, blah, blah. It's time to go. All of a sudden she said my name. And we all just went, ah, like a total bunch of psychos in there, right, everyone? And poor Julie, she started to cry. The boys started to cry, like almost like got really upset. Like they were like shocked because she literally was getting ready to get up that award. I was ready to throw her flowers. And they said my name. And in that moment, I said, I can survive and thrive anywhere. I am that flower growing in the city in between the cracks. And I can do anything.
Wow.
And that, honestly, as I look back, that was just such a pivotal moment in my life.
So from that moment, how you started feeling, how you started thinking, what changed about you?
So I realized that it doesn't matter where I live. My families have I started to grow up. And I started to, because up to that point, I was really mad at my parents a lot of times, right? Like, why didn't they do this? And why did they do that? And because they didn't know any different. They grew up without parents too, for the most part, right? And so I started realizing that all of us, unless you've got super bad people in your life, 9 times out of 10, the adults in your life gave you everything they could. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yes, there are psychos out there that we read about in the news, right? Come on. But honestly, what I realized, even really, especially parents that have had struggles in their lives, whether it's drugs and addiction, whether it's residential school, it doesn't matter what color they are, whatever, the human race we're talking about. That's such a huge part of it, you know? So it really made me realize that I could survive and that my parents gave me all they could, that they didn't hold anything back, that I didn't have to be bitter or feel like if you would have done this, right? Which is what we do a lot of times when we have trauma. I just started to love my parents. It didn't, because I didn't grow, I was still only a kid. I was like 14, 15 at the time. But I started realizing that it's okay. I got everything I need right here. Because I didn't have any parents there. I didn't have any adults. I paid the adults there. It was crazy, right? When you're in boarding school. And I came out of there. And then, the craziest thing was, so you go from, Grand Prairie, I went to, when I moved to Grand Prairie, I went to Catholic school from grade 4 to grade 7, which is different than public school. So that's fine. I learned that, confession once we got really connected to my Catholic faith again. Then grade 8, this is where this is even the year before boarding school. So I was ready for boarding school. I should have started that. Grade 8, I'm like, I'm bored. I don't want to go to, because I'd already switched schools twice in those 4 years. I could get bored and I go, I don't want to go to that school. Those people are boring. My mom, because I was used to never the same, no consistency. She went, okay, well, where do you want to go? So grade 8, I said, I'm bored of that. I want to go somewhere else to school. And I'd met some friends at, where do you think? The absolute worst school in Grand Prairie. And I said, I want to go to Montrose. Sorry, my Montrose peeps, you know it's true. And this school was crazy. It was like, I didn't know bad stuff. We didn't do drinking or drugs or anything. This school was right, yeah, baby, in there. And so that's where I learned everything I needed to know to go to boarding school. Okay. But, so I had that year, the 12 and 13. I go to boarding school. I'm around all older people. We just hung out. We had a few girls I hung out with grade 9, but we all had older guys. We hung out at Washawnigan Lake and things like that. So I come back in grade 10. And now I'm at a high school that I haven't been to before, right? All my friends have been together for a year. Yeah. I'm like a stranger again. I'm like the new kid in town. And it was hilarious again because everyone's like, you're weird, you're different. Because I was different from boarding school. My experiences, the way I was super confident. But then what happens is you fall into your old patterns. And that's why emotional intelligence is so much a part of my journey. Because what happens is I started going, I don't really fit in here again. So you start making yourself small sometimes, right? To try to fit. And so what happened is I befriended two of my enemies who I thought were just my best friends. And so grade 10 to grade 12 were a little bit difficult in public school. Because if they decided they were mad at me, nobody in the school would talk to me. If they were happy, like they're very controlling. And that's kind of the story of my life, is attracting people because of my strong chi. That's what we do, right? You have to be very careful and protect your energy. And that's what I teach a lot in the communities. And that's why you have to have boundaries. And in our communities, First Nations communities, there are no boundaries. So you got to protect your life force. Otherwise, they come for it. I was, like in Hancock, again, all my movie references, Hancock, right? When the two superpowers come together, the two superheroes, they get weaker. And that's what I almost feel is the same way that I felt, is it was like, oh, okay, these powerful people that really aren't here to support me. So, but I made it out of grade 12 and I graduated and I did a little bit of acting, not as much, because I was still, that's what the cool kids aren't doing. So that's one of my biggest regrets about high school, is not really leaning in hard to my acting ambitions.
You did that because you don't want to shine.
Yeah, and I think because none of my friends were doing it. It wasn't like all the people. I was still hanging out with the party people. And so that's what's hard for young people, right, is trying to find your own path.
It's a peer pressure, right?
Completely, yes. Yeah. Well, and not even. Sometimes it's our own mind.
Yeah. Playing game with us.
Well, because I was in play. I did do Anne of Green Gables. My cool friends, or who I thought were like, that's pretty cool that you did that. And I'd be like, thanks. Nobody said anything. So I almost made up this story, right? And that's what I talk about. We talk about good and bad medicine in our culture. And I always thought it was just medicine people in bundles and ceremonies. And with the work that I do, no, it's not. Even more powerful and more readily, we all have it. It's words and thoughts. Do you know what I mean? And that's what I realized is I put the bad medicine on myself. Oh no, and that's what most people do.
Yeah.
They stop their growth. They stop there. It isn't even what anybody else is thinking.
Let's talk about that a little bit. And how can you prevent it?
Oh, geez. Okay, so that's some of the work that I do. Okay,
Good
so
to
I'll get
stop
back
with.
to, so that's what we do. So when I go in with a group, so a lot of the things, and it's whether it's coaching or whether it's working with a group of people, a lot of it, we start walking through an emotional intelligence presentation. So self-awareness is that first block, right, of us working together. So what makes you tick? What makes you happy, sad, angry? What do you love? What do you dislike? Because so many people in this world have no idea. They just go, well, I should just be happy with what I have. Or I'm just going to be miserable. The world sucks. Yeah. Instead of realizing you can be and do and have whatever you want. So that's really the first part of it, is getting that down to what, what is it? What do you love? Who do you like? I get clients to do a list of 100. And this is one of the two things. One, write down a list of 100 things that you may want to be, do, or have in your life. People go, oh, that sounds hard. No. Not the creative ones. No. I know we could all think of 100 things fairly quickly that we would, but people who are stuck, people who are not there, they go, oh. Why? Because they're always thinking it's got to be a big thing. It's got to be the most important. No, it doesn't. Put on there, you want to get a new hairdresser. You want to try a new shoe store. And they're like, I can put that? Because that's what dreaming is. That's what building your life is. And that's what I've done my whole life. I'm going to make a list. I'm going to make a list of all the things I want. Why? Because I didn't necessarily have that. My family didn't have that ability to dream because they weren't allowed to dream, right? This is all you get. This is the box. So that's, for me, is helping my clients dream. What's your list of 100? And I make them go away and they go, it was hard. But once I got going, it got easy because they're free. They just go, I can do whatever I want. And I said, go to the moon. Well, that's not practical. Well, dreams aren't practical. That's why they're dreams. Put it on there, right? So getting them to break outside of that. The other thing is starting to look at self-talk and good and bad medicine. And that's what I do. And so I use that. And I said, everybody, because affirmations, people go, I don't know what that means. And I go, well, when we have good and bad medicine, when we talk crap to each other or about ourselves, or when we think about ourselves badly, and they're like, oh, okay, yeah. And I said, those are affirmations, what we say to ourselves in our head, right? Whether you're good or whether you're bad, whether you are useful or whether you are not, right? And so what I get them to do is we start writing a list of what are all the thoughts that you think about yourself right now, good and bad. And they get really uncomfortable, especially with the good ones. They don't want to think. Let's put them down. Then I start saying, where did you learn that? Why? Because the only way our human brain is like a computer, as everybody knows. You can't just say, oh, I'm happy now. Why? Because you have to rewrite information over top of the old information, right? That's how recording works. You can't, you actually have to put another piece of information over it. It's the same with our brains. So people just think, oh, I tried saying I love myself once and it didn't work, so it's not going to work. No, it's literally about re-recording. It's like a record. You've got to put those bits into it again, right? And you've got to say it 1,000 times, because you said 1,000 times to get that to stick in your head. People will say, I was just born that way. No, you weren't.
You were programmed that way.
You were programmed that way. You're born just a big lump there, and you get filled with good and bad medicine throughout your life. And so I get people to and the only way that people is to use logic. I can tell you you're really good, but until I said it's like a court case. We have to prove to our brain that it's true. Somebody else can't just say it. So what I make them do is, especially my entrepreneurship programs, they really struggle. I go, so when did you start believing that? Who told you that? Oh, it's always been. No, it didn't. Start thinking. And so not counseling, but we go back a bit and they go, you know what? It was my grade 3 teacher. She said that just like Mrs. McMillan lifted me up, Mr. Fredrickson maybe put you down. Or maybe it was a grandma. Maybe it was a TV show you watched. Maybe it was and they go, oh, and then they realize that. And I go, so how do you feel about that person? I didn't even like them. They're not even around anymore. I haven't seen them in 25 years. And yet you're still allowing that bad medicine to catch your attention and to create. Same with residential school. When I talk to elders and they'll go, yeah, that person. And I go, how long has that person that hurt you been gone for? And they go, oh, that been gone for 40 years. And I said, and you're still letting them torment you and affect you. Man, I loved it when that elder said, F that. And he just walked, but in a good way, he was like, you're right. Oh my gosh. And so we and I talk about casting spells on ourselves to use this medicine. We believe it's true. Why? Because we say it over and over again. And then people go, what do you do? Because we call them automatic negative thoughts, because that's what a lot of people are like, Zan, I tried your positive thinking. Well, what happens is our brain is, again, a computer, and it's trying to make life easy for us. So what it does, once it goes, what's important to you? It doesn't differentiate between a good or a bad thought. And it'll say, whatever you're thinking about the most is what's important to you. Oh, you think you're a bag of crap? No problem. I'm going to help you, Zan, and I'm just going to put that on autoplay because you've got enough things to think about. And so people go, why is it so hard? Because of that. Your brain is trying to help you by putting these thoughts. It doesn't know if it's automatic or negative or not. It's just, it must be important to you if you think it enough. And then people go, oh, they realize how much power. No, you are creating the automatic negative thought. And they go, well, what, you just want me to think positive? Yes, but you can't just start. You've got to regroove that. So no, it is going to take you maybe months, might take you years of saying, I love myself, I love myself, I love myself, for you to believe it. But I promise you, it's going to happen, right? And then the other piece of it, because then I don't want to display it, what I say to people is if you do all of the things and you're still struggling, then maybe it's time for you to go talk to a mental health professional, because I never want to take that away either, because people go, oh, you just think and happy. No, people do have chemical imbalances. People do have other things going on besides just trauma or negative thoughts. So then the final piece, or the next two pieces, one is, okay, what's a more supportive thought? I'm no good. What's a better one? And not, oh, I'm perfect, because that our brain can't handle that, right? What's the smallest step that you could start to train your brain to say, well, I guess I'm good most of the time. Let's start there, right? Because you can't just tell someone, no, start saying you're perfect right now. And that's what I think a lot of people do. And they go, that's BS, this self-help stuff. No, it's not. You spent so long in this hole. No. It's going to take you a little bit of time to crawl out. So be gentle on yourself and have patience. And then that final piece is looking at the people that you take your self-image from. So grade 3 teacher, your mom, your moms, your dads, your cousins, your friends, people on TV. Like one of my biggest role models is Tony Robbins. And not because of now, because when I was 18 years old and I'd come home from the bar in Alberta and I'd be drunk and 2 a.m. and you'd be watching TV and there'd be nothing on except this big tooth dude with 800 cassette tapes, if anybody remember what those are. And he'd be like, do this mind beast thing with me. You need to listen to these 180 cassettes and it's going to cost you $420. Like, this is back in the early days of marketing, right? Like TV marketing. And I was like, one day I'm going to be that guy. I think that guy's got it all together. And I mean, that was the advent of coaching, really, right? And yeah, so the other piece, write down everybody that you get your influence from. Real, fake, dead, alive. And then I'm to score it on a scale of 1 to 5. How much do they energize you? How good do you feel after you think about them? Or after you think of what they taught you? 1, I feel crappy. 5, I feel amazing. And what most people find that are struggling, the majority of their people are a 1 to a 3. They have very few 4s and 5s, which means they're constantly being held down by like the people's negativity around them.
Just by a couple of people.
Well, no, everybody on their list. So they give me a list of 20 people, and I've asked them to score them. 1 is really low, you feel no good around them. 5, you feel awesome around them. The majority of people that are struggling, their list of 20 or 30 people, they're mostly 1s and 2s. So people that don't energize them, people that don't make them happy, do you know what I mean? Yep. And when really, we should be trying to find 4s and 5s in our life. So that, to me, is a big part of it. You got to work it together, because part of our negative mindset does come from the people that we take our self-worth from, our view of ourself. And so that is a big part of undoing that bad medicine. That, and I don't want to say bad, that unhealthy medicine that's been put upon us.
That is amazing. So many things. We don't have a lot of time. I have to be a little bit. Looking at your life right now, what are some of your advice for young Indigenous individuals that are struggling? Because I know there's a lot of people are struggling, right? So what do you say to them? What is your message?
We've got, there's all different levels of struggle, right? So we're like kind of chatting here. So the first thing I'm going to say, and I'm talking at a higher level, because I'm like, we know we've got different levels of struggle. We've got street, we've got up, people in post-secondary. So I'm going to just talk about, and I think that's what you want from that 30,000 view. So one of the things is say yes to opportunities. Even when you have no idea what it means, even though you go, but I don't know if I can speak in public, I don't know if I can do this. I look at all of my opportunities, and I've had a lot of weird. I've been to the Philippines as a Canadian Indigenous person specialist. I've been to, I've sat on just different things, boarding school, all these things that have come. Why? Because I said yes. I never knew about boarding school. His wife said, you should go. And I went, okay. And if somebody says, oh, you should try these drugs, don't do them. But you know what I mean? When I talk about the positive story, I always have to put it, my humor, like I said, always. This is Tinder dating, my friend. You may need to see 20 counselors before you find the right one. So that's what I say about the healing journey, is get on it. And if your house was on fire, would you go to the first door, knock on it, and go, oh, shoot, nobody answered. I guess my house is just going to burn down. That's what we do with healing. Oh, well, that person didn't help me, so I'm just giving up. No, man, your house is on fire. bang at every single door in the community. You need to yell from the town center, I need help. And don't stop until that fire is out.
One thing is, it's okay sometimes to ask for help, right? Some people get like,
Yes.
oh no, it's not. I'm like, so you want to talk about that a little bit?
We have got to start embracing our vulnerability and stop being, what it is we're very easily offended now.
Yeah.
And that comes from trauma, that comes from that's why I'm so invested in emotional intelligence. Because when people say no, and it's funny, because I have a network marketing business as well, and that's everyone's biggest fear is no. What if they say no? What if they, well, they're not rejecting you. They just don't need nail polish that day. They don't need cooking. But we've become so sensitive to people saying no to us that means something about it. Or I'm devastated now they said no. It might be no for right now. It may be no, I don't have the skills to help you. We have to start realizing that when they say no, that it isn't a personal attack on us. And some people, well, it can be. We're talking about 95% of the times that somebody says no to you. It's not a personal attack. And that doesn't mean that you should never ask anyone for help. It's really about, no, this is your life. This is your health. This is your well-being. These are your dreams and goals. How bad do you want it? And that's the biggest thing, as you know with anything. We start at the core of goals. What do you want? These are the 4 questions I ask people. What do you want? Or what might you want? Why is it important to you? Because that's what we forget. And people, as soon as something gets in their way, they go, oh, I can't do this. It's not important. I'm giving up. No. Why is it important? Because we always say your why needs to make you cry. Otherwise, you're going to give up, right? When things get hard. So your why needs to be big, my friend, whether that's getting sober, having your grandma talk to you again, whatever, like getting to the core of people's soul. And then what might you do to get it? Not how are you going to get it, because people get stuck and they get scared because what if it's got to be perfect? No. Let's start brainstorming a whole bunch of ideas, because if one doesn't work out, then we get to move on to another one. And then finally, what does success look like to you? Because it's amazing the people out there, you use Donald Trump. There can be never enough money. And sorry, don't mean to go into politics again, but it's just giving people caricatures or really, it doesn't matter how much money some people have. Because they never set a goal of what rich was to them, they're never rich enough. Or they set the goal, oh, I'm just going to be rich. Well, what does that look like for you? Because you may be rich right now and you have no idea. Because you just have this, so that's what I say to people. Make some smart goals for yourself too. Be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, right? But it's time for people, and then people go, what if I don't? And that's what I did. I spent 5 years at College of New Caledonia here in town to get a 2-year diploma. And not because I wasn't smart, because every time I'd go, I don't want to do that for the rest of my life. So I'd switch to another line. And then I would stop that. And then I would stop that. Finally, CNC said, you're closest to getting a criminology diploma. Take these 2 classes, you're leaving now. Because I was starting to bring down their graduation rates. They had too many of us professional students. But the biggest thing I would tell somebody is just pick something. Because I don't want to say I wasted 5 years, but I kind of did. I could have been doing so many more things, but I was just kind of killing time there because I was too scared to pick something. So what I say to anybody out in the world, my entrepreneurs, those people with those big ideas, don't worry about it. Life is long. You are 20 years old. You're going to be 21 next year one way or another. So you can either be 21 with a certificate in something, tried a job that didn't work out for you, went down the line, but try something because you are young. And that's the one thing I didn't do is go to acting school. I only have one regret in my life, is that I didn't, when I was 19, when I moved here, one of my sisters said, why don't you apply to acting school? Why don't you go to Toronto? And you know what I said? That's not practical. Who can get a job? You can't get a job doing, getting an acting degree. What the heck does that give you? Well, geez, I spent 5 years in college to get a 2-year diploma that I don't use. Do you see what I mean? So that's what I would tell young people. Time is going to pass by either way. You can either have something during that time, even if it's not the right thing. But it really doesn't matter because all of those things are going to lead to the thing or to the things. And young people, I say to them, I go, oh, heck no, I'm going to have 5 more careers. And they're like, but you're old. How dare you? Anyway, no, because I'm still dreaming. I have a list of 150 things that I've still got to accomplish. So that's what I need people to stop thinking, that there is an end. Another group I worked with, we talked about goals, and they were middle-aged women. Yep. The one lady put up her hand, put her hand over her mouth. She goes, "Oh my gosh, San." And I said, "What?" She goes, "I've been planning my funeral for the past 2 years." And I said, "What do you mean?" And they all thought she meant like suicide or something. She goes, "No." She goes, "Once I hit 60, that's how our family was, is that's your time is done." She goes, "I've had all my kids go and put masking tape with their name over everything I own in my house, so that they just go get." And I said to her, and I looked at her, I said, "How do you feel now?" She goes, "F that." She said, "I got goals. I'm ripping the masking tape. I'm burning that house to the ground. You're right. What am I doing?" I'm like, "So you're just going to leave it and start?" So what did she do? They went and sold everything they owned, and they're in an RV now traveling across the States.
Oh, that's amazing.
Isn't it? Like, it's just, and it's a tribute to her, because she leaned in hard and went, "I can do anything at any age." Yeah. So that's what I say, you're never too old. And that's my biggest regret, is when I was 20, I thought that was, oh, life is going to go by so fast and there's not going to be, no, try it all, do it all. The healthy things, go for it. The opportunities are out there. And my last point that I would say about it, there's no better opportunity to be an Indigenous person than right now in history.
Why?
Why? Because of reconciliation, because of the awareness of government. And not because there's still racism, there's still all of this, but the programs and services that are available out there to us right now, doesn't mean no, it doesn't stop racism, it does. But in terms of our development, in terms of us rocketing to that next level of our development, of our community, there is so much resources, funding, and things like that out there available. So that would be my thing to young people is, oh my, if you've got an idea, don't ask everybody. Go to your local funding agency, because every community's got funding agency. Go to that. And just because the band office says no, ask them, where else can I get funding? Because I promise you that education director has a pile of funding applications for you. They're just waiting for somebody to give it to. So that's what I would say is, get engaged in your life, lean in hard. This sadness, this lack of direction, this lack of goals, to me, is a really huge thing in our society. Because people just kind of go then into, oh, well, other opportunities that aren't so healthy for them.
Okay, beautiful. So where can people find you?
You can find me on my website. So zandraross.ca, ZANDRAROSS.ca. I'm sure there'll be a link down below. I also am on Facebook. I absolutely love social media. That's my other fun thing that I love to tell people. They all go, social media is the devil. I go, seriously, it's the best thing ever. Why? Because I've managed it. Cut out the negativity, cut out the race, just have positive sunshine. So Zandra Ross, I would love for anybody to come friend me. It's really about sharing the love and sharing good medicine throughout this whole world. That is all my remaining years are about.
Okay, beautiful. It was a pleasure to have you on the show. I'd like you to finish the show. So you can look at that camera and then finish the show.
Thank you, everyone, so much for tuning into this episode of Northern BC Narratives. We are so pleased to have you. Thank you for all of our team here. And please check out all of the other amazing people that have been portrayed, and their stories have been recorded through this initiative. Thank you so much.